Let's welcome to the stage the immediate past chair for ESOP, Dave Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Fitzgerald, and I am the immediate past chair of your ESOP Association. And this is a hero's send-off because today we gather to honor J. Michael Keeling on the occasion of his retirement from the ESOP Association. Michael served as president for 28 years. Prior to that, for 9 years, Michael was in the private practice of law, and his favorite client was, yup, you guessed it, the ESOP Association. Altogether, 37 years is a long tenure, to be sure. Michael built us a very strong organization. He didn't just build it strong, he built it to last, to go on long after he retired. He might not love everything the ESOP Association does in the future, but I can assure you, there's nothing he wants to see more than to see the ESOP Association thrive, serve its members, protect ESOP law, and lead our movement. Michael is dedicated and passionate about ESOPs. Now, I'd like to take a moment to recognize Michael's family, who shared Michael with us for all these years. We are honored to have Michael's wife, Michelle, with us here today. Michelle was born in Prague, Czechoslovakia, in the midst of turmoil and upheaval. The story of how her father narrowly escaped execution in 1950 and how her family escaped to Germany is almost unimaginable. In 1952, she came to the U.S. In the course of her career, she held top jobs in retail for major department stores in Washington, D.C., including buyer, fashion director, and coordinator. And recently, she retired as part owner of a Chinese antique store in Georgetown. This August, Michael and his wife, Michelle, will celebrate 50 years of marriage together. Their daughter, Alexandra, is an attorney for New York State Mental Hygiene Legal Services in New York City. She couldn't be here with us today because of a court date. Such is the life of an attorney sometimes. Their son, J. Michael Keeling Jr., is conservation and exhibition technician for Johns Hopkins University Library in Baltimore, Maryland. His wife is named Alex. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here with us tonight because of illness tonight. And Michael's baby grandson, Francis Marion, couldn't be here with us either, but I was really hoping to get a chance to meet him. So now, Michael and his son are both named Michael Keeling. And Michelle sounds kind of like Michael. And their daughter and their daughter-in-law have the same name. Things must get pretty confusing when they all get together. We are also honored to have Michael's invited guests with us here today, including, maybe stand, Molly Kellogg, Susan Michaels, Jim Lutkemeyer, Amy Gwozdowski, and Barbara Pate. I'd also like to acknowledge Jim Turner, who retired from CFO of the ESOP Association last week. Thank you all for coming today. Now I'd like to tell you about Michael's career highlights. Michael graduated from Kilgore High School in Texas in 1965. Did you know Michael was valedictorian of his class? Overachiever. Then he went to Yale, where he majored in political science and minored in history and graduated in 1969. President George W. Bush was a classmate and friend of Michael's at Yale. As a summer job, thanks to Lady Bird Johnson's chief of staff, then intern Michael got to visit 10 Indian reservations and write a report that recommended a project that ended up becoming the Inn of the Mountain Gods Hotel and Casino, a fantastic resort and ski center with a golf course, ski center, a golf course, and Las Vegas-style gambling, a $30 million economic development project for the benefit of the Mescalero Apaches in New Mexico. Then Michael got a law degree from the University of Texas School of Law in Austin. After that, Michael served Austin, Texas Congressman J.J. Pickle from 1972 to 1981. I love that there was a Congressman Pickle and that Michael got to work for him. Congressman Pickle was a protege of United States President Lyndon Johnson. Michael will tell you a story about that in a few minutes. Even though the 1970s was kind of a long time ago, it's pretty cool that Michael can point to legislation that his congressman worked on, like, for instance, a law that benefits craft beer companies, and say, we had a hand in that. Not to mention the investigations work Michael and Congressman Pickle did. I promised myself I would not let this speech become a roast, but there are a couple of observations I'd like to make, even at the risk of sinking to that level. You know, it's a good thing Michael had so many CPAs and CFOs serve as chair of the ESOP Association, and it's a good thing Michael became a lawyer instead of an accountant. Because Michael is not a big fan of accrual basis financial statements. Michael doesn't generally accept generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. In fact, I once heard Michael giving a speech before an audience, and he was talking about EBITDA. Many of you know that means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Michael called it EBDB-dobby-doo. And he sounded a little like Fred Flintstone. Perhaps you know Michael is not the most technologically inclined person. I think we finally cured him of saying things like, let's ask the Google. However, when it comes to monkey surveys, I found it's just more fun to join in than to try and change Michael. Now I call them monkey surveys too. So let's talk a little poli-sci. Michael once told me about his very first political campaign. At 8 years old, he worked to elect a man named William Blakely, who had been appointed senator and then wanted to be elected to the Senate. Anyway, 8 years old is a pretty early start for a young man in politics. Michael also tells a story about the first political campaign he worked on as an adult in his college years. As he describes it, his primary assignment was to empty the garbage. For 28 years with the ESOP Association, Michael focused on two things above all else. Number one, providing value for the members of the ESOP Association. And number two, on protecting ESOPs in Washington, D.C. For many years, I had the pleasure of sitting in the audience at ESOP Association conferences and listening to Michael Keeling give us the rally speech, the pep talk. Michael believes that the best way to lobby for the benefit of ESOPs is at the grassroots. There is nothing more compelling than everyday employee owners telling their stories to members of Congress. There is no better place to do that than at the company in the member of Congress's district back home. As the president of the ESOP Association, there was nothing Michael liked better than to hear a member of Congress tell him about their visit to an ESOP company. Sure, jobs, jobs, jobs makes for a great speech, and retaining great jobs in the town where ESOP-owned companies were founded makes for a great political platform. But what really captures the hearts of the members of Congress is that super special feeling they get when they visit our companies and hear from employee owners. Michael taught us how to harness the power of that intangible asset and how to use it in DC. Michael, you made us realize we can do it. It did matter, and it does matter. Michael has also taught us the importance of having our message be bipartisan, nonpartisan even. Michael was so good at leading by example on that front, I actually thought his personal political leanings were the opposite of what they actually are. Even more than leading our government affairs, Michael's favorite thing was always the Employee Ownership Foundation. Michael once told me, "You've got to influence the thought leaders if you want to influence public opinion." Our foundation may not be enormous. However, it has realized amazing results for its size. Through the Kelso Fellowships program and the research we have funded, we have moved academia. We have influenced think tanks. We have influenced public policy. And the newly established Rutgers Institute represents one of Michael's proudest dreams, a dream come true. Who knows what great things will come from that achievement? You can rest assured, time will tell. So I guess you get to know a guy pretty good after working closely with him for a decade and after talking on the phone for an hour or more every Friday for a couple of years. Not to mention the icebreaker exercises from our board of directors meetings each quarter. Those weren't confidential, were they? Let me tell you about 3 of Michael's personal shares. Number 1, what song would be your personal theme song? Like in the movie Happy Feet, the one with the dancing penguins? Michael's answer was either Amazing Grace or the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Personal share number 2. Who would play Michael in a documentary biopic featuring Michael Keeling's life story? Michael's answer was someone who can lead people without bossing them around, perhaps with a spoonful of sugar. That person was Mary Poppins. Can you just imagine a documentary about Michael Keeling starring Julie Andrews? But hey, why not? Personal share number 3. Describe your happy place. Michael's answer was napping to a ball game on TV and maybe reading a newspaper. However, I would beg to disagree. Having had the opportunity to accompany Michael on his fantastic Gettysburg tour a couple of times, I think Michael's happy place is standing on those rolling hillsides in rural Pennsylvania, telling curious listeners the lessons on leadership and morale that he has gleaned from a lifetime of studying Civil War history. I will always picture Michael in my mind standing near that zigzagged fence, wearing his royal blue ESOP hat with that happy place look on his face, raising his voice and drowning out the hissing, belching tour buses, telling the story of Pickett's charge. Or maybe Michael's happy place was standing in front of the crowd at the Las Vegas Technical Conference and Trade Show with just a Post-it note in his hand, interpreting the results of the latest election and what that election might mean to ESOPs. So I want to say a few words about the ESOP Association succession experience. Many years ago, Michael wrote down the best practices for succession planning for DC-based associations, and we have executed that. Michael told us that he should not be involved in picking his successor. Michael told us that any overlap between presidents should be very short. Michael told us that we should pick someone who knew how to run a DC-based association. Ultimately, it happened almost exactly as Michael had laid it out. I have described it to people as a college headmaster search kind of succession. Sure, there's other ways to do it. Maybe it will be done differently in the future. Personally, I'm very proud of the outcome, and I'm very proud that we made it a thorough, careful, and professional process. I'm happy that Michael was able to write his own personal retirement story, and I think I have a little bit of a glimpse into the next chapter of that story. I think he's already getting antsy. I think that happy place he described, napping to a ball game, wasn't really his happy place. Maybe it will be serving on boards, maybe it will be giving speeches, maybe it will be writing a book, but something. It doesn't take much to make Michael happy. A ball game, a newspaper, a cookie, and a microphone. As the first man in his family to live past 50 years old, we are very thankful for Michael's longevity. After all those years of talking about Michael's maybe getting hit by a bus and other equally gruesome potentialities, I am so glad Michael has the chance to write his own personal retirement story. During Michael's amazing career, he authored over 2,000 pages in the ESOP report. Michael made over 300 speeches nationwide. He visited 800 employee-owned companies. One time, Michael Keeling visited Karis Reels, where I work. He told us a story about visiting the King Arthur Flour Company and participating in a baking contest. It was a team event. I can just picture it now. Michael Keeling wearing an apron and an oven mitt covered in flour. I'm not sure whether the baking team did a good job of assessing Michael's baking skills or whether he volunteered. Michael's job was to stay out of the way, clean the utensils, and bring them back to the bakers who knew how to put them to proper use. I forgot the ending of that story, but I believe Michael was on the winning team. So whether it is emptying the garbage for a wannabe congressman's political campaign, or washing the dishes in a winning team's baking contest, or serving as the president of the ESOP Association, to quote Michael, no matter what your assignment, what you do is important. That's a really great theme for all employee owners to embrace, and a really great legend for Michael Keeling to leave us with. I also remember Michael telling me a story about one of the first companies he ever visited. That company is a longtime ESOP company and a customer of ours at Karis Reels by the name of Okanite. O-K-O-N-I-T-E. In that story, Michael tells about the tradition of the sign-off. Imagine a telegraph from Gettysburg to Washington, D.C. at the end of the day's telegraph transmissions. Good night. That was followed by a last response. Okay, night. Okay, ESOP. Job well done, Michael Keeling. Love you, man. Now let me present the current president of your ESOP Association, Jim Bonham, for a special presentation.
So that one's going to be hard to follow, but I seem to find myself in those shoes currently. Sir Isaac Newton once said, "If I've seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." I'm not going to speak for long today because I have a long future ahead of me with all of you. But I did want to say a few words about what I've learned about Michael Keeling over the last few months. And I wanted to share many of the same things that Dave's already talked about, but 3 points mainly. First, in agreement with Dave entirely, I think one of the lasting legacies of Michael Keeling is that his vision on quality research could be his most enduring legacy. Michael understood from the very beginning that good data results in good policy. And he understood that the underpinnings of everything that we do to support the ESOP community and support employee ownership had to have a basis underneath it, because that's what you use when you talk to policymakers, when you influence thought leaders, and you get their buy-in to what we're doing. That could very well be Michael's most enduring legacy. But I think one of his second most enduring legacies is the way that he has treated the people who have worked for him. Before I took this job, I mentioned this morning, I made some phone calls to people who knew Michael, who had worked for Michael, and asked them questions. How's this going to go over? How are the staff going to react to change? And the answer every time came back, well, it depends on how people perceive Michael has been treated as he goes into his retirement, how his legacy is preserved. So I hope that today and in the future, it will be perceived that Michael's legacy is intact, because it should be. The last thing that I wanted to say is that the vigor by which Michael has defended those essential elements of the ESOP community, the tax benefits, the structures that were laid so long ago by people like Russell Long and Louis Kelso, places his name alongside those giants. So I think that it's knowing that Michael is a creature of the Congress, from one swamp creature to another swamp creature, I wanted to make a presentation to you. So Michael, please come up on stage. So the staff helped draft this. There were a lot of people who were involved in it, but it's a commemoration where Michael's career was honored on the floor of the United States Senate, and a tribute paid to him. It's a wonderful tribute. I hope you have a chance to read it. So Michael, not only do you walk among giants that I get to stand on the shoulders of, now it's officially part of the congressional record, and I know how much you like records. So Michael, congratulations on your retirement. I look forward to the future. Now you need to stay up here on stage.
Okay.
Thank you.
When do I say a few words?
Well,
Huh?
no, please sit. I'd like to welcome Gary Shorman. Thanks.
I got to intro. Now, Now let me present your current chair of the ESOP Association, Gary Shorman, for another special award presentation. Where are you?
Thank you, sir. You know, Dave and I were talking about how we honor, how we preserve and talk about Michael and what he has done, and look forward and yet still take into consideration all those things he's brought forward from his history here, the decades of service. And we were looking at how to do that and how to tell that story each year going forward. So we thought about one thing, and that is every company, in this case association, they have someone who believed in an idea. They then built the organization to pass on to the next group that is running that, and the next group of leaders. And frankly, they're founders. Last year, we heard from Bob Moore of Bob's Red Mill, the founder of that company. The ESOP Association has been built over the years through the efforts of many founders. Michael Keeling took that idea, he took that vision, and built a strong foundation for all of us in this room. That foundation has allowed companies like Eagle, companies like yours, to grow with employee ownership, to do the things that we've talked about in our sessions so far. It also takes a founder or an owner to be able to sell to the employee owners versus selling out to somebody else or another bigger company. So you have to have that. So when we were looking for a way to find Michael, what a better way than to name an award after him that will honor amazing founders of our companies and future founders of our company. And name that award the Michael Keeling Founders Award. Come up here. Come here. Come here. One of the things we did was Sue Butler helped me with this, along with the rest of the board of working to do this. We have right here for you, Michael. This is as heavy as it looks. But it says right here on this, the ESOP Association, J. Michael Keeling Founders Award. And the first recipient of this award is J. Michael Keeling, president of the ESOP Association, 1991 to 2019. And down below it says, for a lifetime of sustained stewardship and service to the ESOP Association and the employee owner movement. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Dave, get in here. Dave.
Come on in, Dave.
Hold on.
She's good.
Put that down. There we go. Yeah. How many of you would like to hear from Michael? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Keeling.
Certainly, I appreciate all that's been said. I appreciate the plaque. I appreciate the honor, memory that you threw forward. But let me make it clear. As far as I'm concerned, it's not about me. It's about you. You have made everything happen. The men and women that work in the ESOP companies, the employee owners, and your clients, that you helped create the ESOP and manage it accordingly. And I just share a few things. Those who've been on the board know that every year when they did an evaluation of me, there'd be some that would say, all he ever does is tell old stories that no one cares about anymore. I'm going to tell you some old stories. The first time I was ever around the ESOP Association governing body, 1982, first quarter 1982, as Dave mentioned, 37 years ago. The executive committee, they were all men then, had me in, and I was part of the swamp. You know, I was trying to get clients and have business and so forth, and it kind of fell in my lap to represent the ESOP Association because some senators wanted to mandate the pass-through of voting to ESOP participants. And so I go to the meeting, and they're talking about this provision and how you read this and how's it going to do this. And I sit there and I said, been there, done that. They're talking about the trees and the forest, just like all these other clients that I have. But before the meeting was over, every one of them was saying, how come the United States does not understand and appreciate how wonderful employee ownership is? And I said to myself, this group is special. This ESOP group is special. And I remember when they offered me the job in the first quarter of 1991, what did the leaders say to me? They said, Michael, you manage the ESOP Association as a well-managed, employee-owned company is managed. And what's the big thing in our world these days? The chapter program. When it was first getting going, gathering strength in the early 90s, the people that were on the board then said, Michael, you oversee the chapter program in a way that the volunteer leaders own the chapter, not the national office, not you. Over 10,000 people attend the chapter meetings now. It's the papacita of the ESOP world. And yes, now I'm going to tell you a little story that involves my ex-boss for nearly 10 years, Congressman Jake Pickle, protege of Lyndon Johnson, president, ever since he had been president of the UT student body in the late 30s when President Johnson first ran for Congress. I had been with Mr. Pickle for only about 4 or 5 months when President Johnson dies in early 1973. Lady Bird called Pickle up and said, I want you to give the eulogy in the rotunda of the Capitol for Lyndon. And of course he said yes. Called around, Joe Califano came down to the office. I was like, you know what, this is historical. Even though I will not be a player in having to write this speech and do the words, I'm going to hang out and see how it's done. And maybe someday tell a story about it. Pickle shared what he felt about President Johnson, et cetera, et cetera. And then he turned and said, you know, I was elected 2 weeks after President Kennedy was murdered in Dallas, Texas. 1963, middle of November, was when his election. It was a tight race. He won. The next morning, he picks up the phone. He calls President Johnson, and he says, Mr. President, all that I am, all that I can be, I owe it to you. And I want to know, without regard to what I think, no regard to what the people of the 10th District of Texas think, the vote you want for me, tell me what it is, and I will vote the way you tell me. Be it the civil rights, the war on poverty, foreign policy. I will vote for how you tell me, President Johnson. President Johnson answered and said, Jake, when you vote, vote for the people. And he hung up the phone. ESOPs are for the people. It's no difference if you're a Democrat or Republican, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, purple state, red state, blue state. The ESOPs are for America, for the community where the ESOPs are, for the company where employee owners work, and most important, for you and your family. It doesn't matter whether you're an Anglo, African American, Hispanic, Indian American. Doesn't matter. It's about you and your security and your future. And as has been alluded to, that is exactly why there is so much support for ESOPs on the Hill. And it's been said why. This here, funded by the Kellogg Foundation, done by the Rutgers Institute and a lot of fellows, talking to many members of employees, average pay, about what the ESOP means to them and what it's done for them. This is on their website, Rutgers University School of Management and Labor Relations. I have one thing to say. Read the red print in italics. They are direct quotes from men and women who are not the top dogs and leaders, but yet employee owners in their company. And that's why, as has been alluded, so many members of Congress have said to me, and they don't know who I am. And, I'm wearing a name tag, so they act like they know me. But they see that ESOP down there, and they say, ESOPs are special. And they repeat often things that you read in that report that I just held up. The words from the people that they represent. The people that they represent. That's who deserves. And I finish with this. Russell Long has been alluded to, one of the most powerful men in the Senate ever. For 20, 30 years, head of the tax laws, got the ESOP codified, put the tax incentives in for ESOPs, announces he's going to retire in 1986. The world was smaller then of the ESOP community. The California people were panicked. They were so convinced that if Russell retired, and he was only in his late 50s, if he retired, that would be the end of ESOPs. They begged him not to retire, that his favorite policy, employee ownership through ESOPs, would be demised, would go away. And you know what Russell said to these people? Russell said, if ESOPs can't survive when I am gone, they deserve to go away. And since 1986, when he retired, ESOPs have gotten stronger because of you and your colleagues and employee owners who are not here. I've often felt E is for the United States, S is for the community where the company is, O is for, quote, the company, and P is for you, participants in the ESOP ecosystem and those who help create ESOPs. I thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I've often thought, in the hereafter, when I run into Jake Pickle, I'll say, Mr. Pickle, I worked for the people. Thank you very much. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Michael, I love your passion, and you can see the people here that love you. You'll be around right here for a little bit, but then we have a meeting room that you'll be able to just meet, receive, talk to people that want to come by and say hello. It's going to be in the Avenue Grill restaurant.
All right.
It's going to, right from here, you'll head there, and then people can come meet you, talk to you. You can spend all day there, as long as you want to do that. Just go to the elevator and then press the Pennsylvania Avenue button. It'll get you there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Congratulations. What great passion. What a great leader. What a great legend you've left with us. Thank you very much, Michael Keeling.